Super Mario World is one of the best loved and most well known platformers ever, and it kicked off the Super Famicom in legendary style, being one of 2 launch titles in Japan along with F-Zero. Super Mario World had a very difficult task ahead of it. Super Mario Bros. 3 is one of the most groundbreaking titles of all time and permanently changed the way that platforming games are expected to play, turning a relatively simple experience into a full-blown gaming journey. Surpassing Mario 3 would be no mean feat, but Nintendo knew they could not launch their new 16-bit console without a Super Mario game, and thanks to the extremely high bar that the previous entry had set, it had to be a masterpiece and blow everything out of the water. According to Miyamoto, there was around 10 people that worked on Super Mario World. This consisted of Shigeru Miyamoto as the producer, Takashi Tezuka as the director, Toshihiko Nakago as the programming director, Hideko Kono as the map director, Koji Kondo as the composer, Shigefumi Hino as a character designer, Katsuya Eguchi as a map and stage designer, and then a number of programmers. Whilst Miyamoto stated there was 3 main programmers, he didn't clarify exactly which 3 programmers he was referring to, and a number of sources vary on which programmers worked on the game. There would have been at least system programmer Toshio Iwaki, object programmer Kazuaki Morita, and then Tatsuo Nishiyama, and potentially a few more programmers. It took around 2 years to create Super Mario World, which Tezuka clarified was less time than it took to make Super Mario Bros. 3, which took 2.5 years. Conversely, in an interview for Nintendo Player's Guide Mario Mania, Miyamoto said that it had actually taken 3 years and 16 people to develop the game, so the truth may lie somewhere in between. Miyamoto stated in an interview in 1990 from the official guidebook that whilst everyone had clear roles, despite his role as a producer, he did not wield ultimate authority, and instead, they often chose to debate ideas together as a team, rather than be dictated upon by above. The general approach was that they had long discussions and debates about new ideas and approaches, and then the programmers would create a simple mock-up or experimentation of the idea, and they would then have more discussions on whether or not they thought it was worth pursuing as a viable addition to the game. The debates could often go long into the night, because there was often a slightly different approach to game design from each member of the team. Kono wanted to create games that were deeper, Tezuka wanted to create games which no matter how many times someone completed them, they always wanted to go back for more. Nakago was focused on creating games that people could get lost in for hours, and Miyamoto wanted to create games that became a destination for play, a world that kids feel attachment to. He clarified this statement in the Mario Mania Player's Guide, mentioning that he feels video games are like playgrounds, and he wants people to have whole drawers of playgrounds at their fingertips. These different approaches are all clear in the final product, and all aided in creating how the game turned out. There are a number of various decisions made through this approach which directly affected the way the final game played. One such example is that throughout the game, Mario can carry an additional item in a box, which falls down when he needs it. It was a point of debate as to how this item was retrieved. It would either fall and be frozen in mid-air, fall and go straight through the terrain, or fall and go along the terrain like an item found from a question mark block. In the end, they chose to go with falling straight through the terrain to maintain the balance of difficulty. Another example is the controls. Many on the team had the opinion that the controls should be as simple as possible and that they should remove any redundant or unnecessary controls, whilst others wanted to utilise the many new buttons featured on the Super Famicom controller. Ultimately, the former opinion won out and many controls and moves were removed during development, but some useful ones remained, such as being able to use L and R to scroll the screen horizontally and see what is coming up. In terms of the sound creation, Koji Kondo claimed it was actually more difficult to create the sound on the Super Famicom compared to the Famicom, as he had to create the sound samples himself from scratch. Kondo was aware that as the hardware was improving, game music would have to compete on the same level as general music, and he was ready to take on that challenge, creating something that works both as music to listen to and music to accompany playing a video game. Kondo said that his general approach was to create the main theme of a game first and then to work off that. In total, it took him 1.5 years to create all the music for Super Mario World. This was in part due to working with the capabilities of the Super Famicom for the first time, as well as the fact that it wasn't his only project. In the 2001 book, Game Maestro Volume 3, Kondo said that he spent a lot of time thinking about whether or not the music should attempt to imitate real music or evolve a new style and lexicon of game music. He decided to go down the middle, using sounds that resemble real-world instruments but arranging them in an unusual way, like putting a steel drum and banjo together. He clarified this stance in an interview he did with Iwata, in which he reconfirmed his worry at the time about just exactly what game music was, and his approach was to use ensembles of instruments that you wouldn't hear anywhere else to give game music a clear personality. Kondo agreed with Iwata in that it's traditional game technology with new timbers, a hybrid with new materials, and that was how he made the sound for Super Mario World. Miyamoto claimed that working with the Super Famicom over the Famicom brought with it a number of immediate improvements. The first being that they no longer had restrictions on scrolling and the number of colours, and plenty of other general hardware improvements. The flip side of this was that they was working with a brand new system, and the software tools was not fully developed yet, and they were still getting to know the console as they was developing the game. Miyamoto realised during development that there was a danger they could create the same game as the previous games just with updated graphics, and this was something that the whole team intently wanted to avoid. One of the ways they did this was by implementing new features, some of which they'd wanted in the original games. Miyamoto had a picture of Mario riding a horse-like creature taped beneath his desk since 1984, as it was something he had always wanted to implement in a Mario game, but was unable to do with the memory limitations of the hardware. This concept art directly led to the creation of Yoshi, which was the perfect example of how hardware innovation enabled design innovation. This isn't to say though that there wasn't also a focus on graphical design. Miyamoto was very clear in wanting to improve the graphics as much as possible, even down to minute details, such as making sure that Mario's eyes have a white part in them, which they never had before. Yoshi was developed over time. Its eventual design came to look the way it did because of the setting of Mario World in a dinosaur land. Originally, Hino created something which looked more like a large crocodile, which the team felt looked out of place. Tezuka sketched something cuter, which was what the eventual design would end up being. Tezuka's design contained a shell on Yoshi's back, which was a callback to all of the general turtles in Mario World, despite the fact that Yoshi was meant to be a dinosaur. Tezuka has always insisted that it was a shell, whilst others see it as a saddle. To make his tongue stick out, Hino stated that Mario hits Yoshi on the back of the head, which causes Yoshi to stick out his tongue in surprise. Later on, after some people felt sorry for Yoshi, they decided to pass it off as Mario pointing forward and saying go. Another new element they introduced to the game was the cape. This changed a lot over the course of the development, with Tezuka stating that originally the controls for the cape were much more complicated, but allowed more direct control over opening the cape and catching the wind. When this was playtested, players found it difficult to control the cape and they couldn't handle Mario, so they decided to simplify the cape controls. This ended up making the controls feel more playable, but had the effect of making Mario's flying a little more clumsy, with slightly less direct control. This was a clear trend throughout the development on Super Mario World, and many decisions were made on how the game played because of feedback from testers. Miyamoto stated that they made Super Mario Bros. 3 for experienced players, but wanted Super Mario World to be friendlier to beginners. Tezuka said that any time a playtester said a section was too hard, they'd scrutinise it and potentially make changes. A direct example of this is the implementation of the dotted line blocks. These are blocks that are throughout the game, covering pits and other obstacles. When the blocks are activated, the game becomes easier. Kono stated that activating all the switches made the game much easier, and it was intended that players that were having difficulty with the game would aim to activate these, whilst veteran players would leave them off. Miyamoto liked this idea because he wanted to create a game that players would be able to explore and not simply complete, so making the game easier was a prerequisite. Super Mario World featured 9 worlds, with 96 stages split amongst them. Mario gained a number of additional moves, such as a spin move which could destroy blocks beneath him, and some new power-ups, including the cape which let him fly, being able to use Yoshi to eat up enemies, using a baby Yoshi to a similar effect, and more. The overworld lets the player select a stage and find hidden levels and secrets, as well as indicate the general setting the level will take, such as a castle or ghost house. Miyamoto said in an interview for Mario's 25th anniversary that Mario World was his favourite Mario game, because it combined all the action from previous Super Mario Bros, but expanded on the new world, and included every feature you could want from a platformer. I think this is clear in the way Mario has developed from that point onwards. Any 2D Mario game made after Mario World features essentially the same setup in terms of the way the game progresses and plays. Mario World 2 is an exception, but that one doesn't have Mario as the main character. I think it's clear Mario World was the culmination of what they thought a Mario game could be. It included every element they could possibly want to include, every feature, and they developed a game they was truly happy with. It's rare to read these sort of interviews and development histories and not come across regrets and things they wish they could have done, but that doesn't seem to play a huge part in Mario World. The only example is a mistake they made in Bowser's colour design. His hide should have been orange, but Hino accidentally coloured it green. It's worth mentioning that the Wikipedia article mentions that Miyamoto felt the game was incomplete and rushed towards the end. However, this is not corroborated by the source that is linked and is not reflected in any interview I've seen of Miyamoto. The attitude of the developers towards the game reflects the attitudes of many gamers. Even until today, many people are perfectly happy with Mario World and couldn't wish for anything more, being the perfect example of a 2D Mario game. After this, Mario games went in different directions, with Yoshi's Island being a departure in style and gameplay, and then the 3D games changing things even more. This isn't just the opinion of a gamer from today looking back, but was widely shared at the time of release. CVG gave the game 96%, EGM 9 out of 10, Superplay 94% and Game Informer 10 out of 10. The reception was ever so slightly less warm in the East, with Famitsu giving the game 34 out of 40, however it was clear that wherever the game was being played, people were having fun. It's contentious for many people whether or not Super Mario World surpassed Mario Bros. 3. It isn't quite as groundbreaking, but it is potentially a lot more fun, and the world that was created in that game is still fun to explore even to this day. Super Mario World set the bar for which all 2D platformers have to compete against, and even brand new 2D platformers will inevitably be compared to Mario World. That's how all-encompassing this game has become. It was a classic upon release, and it will continue to be one for as long as gaming exists. Thanks for watching this making of. If there's a game you'd like me to cover in the future, let me know in the comments below and I'll add it to the list. If you like this sort of video, please make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, as I'm going to be making a fair few more in the future. Additionally, I have a Discord link in the description and a join button next to the subscribe if you fancy doing that. Thanks for watching. Goodbye!